How to Stop Being a Victim and Take Control of Your Life. Carl Jung.
This story takes you on a profound journey of self-discovery and female empowerment, showing how to let go of the victim role and take control of your own life. The intimate and reflective narrative weaves together philosophy, neuroscience, and psychology, creating both identification and emotional connection. Throughout the story, you will uncover the strength that lies within you. You will see how old patterns and automatic habits can hold you back, how the absence of self-leadership erodes self-worth, and how your self-perception directly shapes the way the world responds to you. Drawing on the teachings of Carl Jung and other thinkers, the narrative reveals how awakening inner awareness, cultivating self-care, preserving mystery and curiosity, and stepping away from competition can transform not only your life, but also how you see yourself, and how others see you. Blending insights from neuroscience on emotional memory, dopamine, and value perception with philosophical reflections on authenticity, freedom, and self-sufficiency, this story shows that confidence and strategic presence create a natural magnetism. In the end, the protagonist discovers that the control she thought was lost had always been within her, waiting to be awakened, inviting every reader to embrace her power and build a full, independent, and meaningful life. Stop waiting for someone to save your life. Discover the power that has always been within you. 1. Have you noticed how, at certain moments in life, it feels like everything is beyond our control? It's as if we are trapped in a story someone else wrote for us, and the role we've been given is that of the victim. The feeling is suffocating. Looking around and believing that everyone else has more luck, more opportunities, more strength. Meanwhile, you feel stuck in the same place, without direction, waiting for something external to change your reality. That endless waiting eats away at you, because deep down, you know no one is coming to rescue you. But why is it so hard to take the reins of your own life? Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This phrase reveals the first uncomfortable truth. Much of what we believe to be bad luck, failure, or lack of opportunity is actually a reflection of internal patterns repeating themselves without our awareness. Our brain loves to save energy, so it creates shortcuts called habits. When you hold on to the I, victim role for too long, those habits turn into an automatic pattern. Without realizing it, you reinforce every day the very story you wish to change. From a neuroscience perspective, this happens because our brain is shaped by repetition. Every negative thought, every comparison, every "I can't" strengthens neural connections that sustain this fragile identity. And like a trail in the grass that becomes a road after countless steps, these paths grow easier to follow. The result? Whenever a challenge appears, your mind takes you to the same conclusion. It's no use, I can't change. That's how the vicious cycle of helplessness begins. And here comes the question you may be avoiding. Who would you be without this victim narrative? It can be frightening to imagine that letting go of this identity means you no longer have excuses not to act. It's more comfortable to blame circumstances than to claim your own power. But believe me, that illusion comes at a high cost. Every day spent in that role is one less day living the life you deserve. The first step is to see this clearly. Not as an accusation against yourself, but as an opportunity to awaken. Because if life has felt like a burden, maybe it's not because the world is cruel, but because you haven't yet realized the strength you already have. When you constantly put yourself second, something happens almost invisibly. You start to disappear from yourself. Life goes on, days pass, but inside, there is a silence that screams. It's as if your essence drifts farther away, taking with it your joy, your spontaneity, and the light in your eyes. This absence runs so deep that you often only notice it when you feel you are no longer the same person. And worse, you start to believe this is normal, that it's just part of life. Carl Jung said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." And here lies the trap. When you live looking outward, seeking approval, affection, or recognition, you hand over to the world a power that should be yours. When the world doesn't respond, frustration rises, and that frustration feeds the belief that you have no worth. But the problem is not the lack of external love, it's the lack of inner presence. It is when you abandon yourself that emptiness begins to take charge of your story. Viktor Frankl reinforces this with a timeless statement. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. That change doesn't begin with grand gestures, but with a simple movement, returning to listen to yourself. Neuroscience explains that when you drift away from your own choices, you activate brain areas linked to helplessness and resignation, as if there were no way out. This pattern reinforces emotional dependence because your mind tries to compensate for the lack of control by clinging to something or someone. But what if, instead of clinging, you learn to let go? What if you accepted that the absence of self-leadership is not your destiny but a sign to reconnect? The brain has an incredible capacity for adaptation, called neuroplasticity. This means that no matter how unbreakable old patterns may seem, they can be replaced. The question is, are you willing to allow yourself this change? When you drift away from yourself, you also lose direction. But reclaiming that space is possible, and more than that, it's necessary. In the next step, we will talk about something that may seem simple but is truly revolutionary. Self-care. Not as a superficial act, but as the foundation to rebuild your identity and regain control of your life. When was the last time you did something for yourself? Without rushing, without guilt, simply because you wanted to. Maybe it's been so long that the question itself feels strange. But the truth is, self-care is not a luxury, not a frivolity. It's survival. When you neglect yourself, you send a silent message. I don't matter. And over time, you start to believe it. That's how self-worth wears away, not all at once, but little by little, every time you put yourself last on your own list. Carl Jung said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." Self-care is exactly that, an act of looking inward. And contrary to what many think, it's not just about taking a relaxing bath or buying something new. It's about making choices that honor who you are, even when no one is watching. It's getting enough sleep, saying no when necessary, feeding your mind with what nourishes you, surrounding yourself with people who add to your life. It's rebuilding, brick by brick, the space you once abandoned within yourself. Nietzsche deepens this idea with his concept of the will to power, the force that drives us to create, transform, and evolve. He said, "Become who you are." This is a call to authenticity. Because when you stop waiting for the world to give you what you refuse to give yourself, you discover something powerful. Your autonomy is your freedom. And that freedom begins with the simple act of caring for yourself. Science explains this in a fascinating way. When you practice self-care, you activate the brain's reward system. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter tied to pleasure and motivation, increases, bringing a sense of well-being and reinforcing self-esteem. In other words, the more you care for yourself, the more your brain associates pleasure with those actions, making them natural. This positive cycle is the exact opposite of the victim pattern, which reinforces helplessness. That's why self-care isn't selfish, it's self-preservation. It's telling yourself, I am a priority. And that priority doesn't need to be announced. It shows in how you treat yourself. The question is, are you willing to claim that space that belongs only to you? Because when you do, something shifts. And that change never goes unnoticed, not by you, and not by those around you. When life, feels too predictable, something inside us begins to wither. A routine without novelty suffocates. The absence of surprise dulls the spark of living. The same happens with how we see ourselves. When we think we already know everything about who we are, we shut the door to the unexpected. Without realizing it, we start living in black and white. That's why mystery isn't just attractive to others, it's essential for ourselves. It keeps alive the flame of curiosity, that urge to discover, to experience, to feel something new. Carl Jung said, "The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct acting from inner necessity." This reveals something crucial. We need movement, play, and lightness to stay connected to life. When you are trapped in the victim role, there's no room for the unexpected. Everything is repetition, everything is predictable, everything is heavy. But when you choose to reclaim mystery, you begin to create experiences that surprise first yourself. And that is liberating. Søren Kierkegaard reinforces this idea when he says about the authenticity of existence. Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. That forward-looking gaze is what gives life flavor. It's the courage to do something different, to learn something new, to change a habit, to allow yourself. And here's where neuroscience steps in. Our brain releases dopamine when we anticipate something pleasurable or uncertain. That anticipation generates energy, motivation, and desire. In other words, when you become unpredictable to yourself, you reignite the chemistry of life. This isn't about creating a persona or using mystery as a superficial game. It's about building a personal narrative that feels interesting to you. Ask yourself, when was the last time I did something for the first time? The lack of curiosity about your own story is one of the causes of emotional apathy. If everything is the same, if everything is familiar, nothing moves us. But when you decide to add novelty, everything shifts. Even the way people look at you changes, because you begin to radiate something the world recognizes as rare, living energy. One of the greatest traps many women fall into is believing they need to compete for attention, affection, or approval. Looking around and feeling like everything is a competition is exhausting and, in truth, distracts you from the central point. Your worth does not depend on anyone else. When you understand this, something changes in your posture, your energy, the way you move through the world. You stop trying to prove something and simply exist with authenticity, and that is irresistible. Carl Jung reminds us, loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. The first step to stop competing is recognizing that what you're searching for outside already exists within you. When you stop measuring your worth by the eyes of others, you discover a freedom that transforms everything, your thoughts, your choices, your presence. And it is precisely that presence that silently reveals the magnetism of self-sufficiency. Epictetus makes this vision even clearer. Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Rather, wish that what happens happen the way it happens. Then, you will be happy. This means stopping the fight against what you cannot control, including other people's attention and approval. Neuroscience confirms this. Our brain perceives scarcity as value. When you stop competing, when you hold your space calmly, you automatically raise the perception of your worth in the eyes of others, and most importantly, in your own. The power is not in chasing, it's in being unshakable. Stopping the need to compete is not passivity, it is posture, awareness, and strategy. When you place yourself at the center of your own life, you embody competence, self-sufficiency, and confidence. And these qualities cannot be forced, bought, or faked. They can only be lived from the inside out. Every gesture, every choice, every well-timed silence communicates more than any attempt to prove yourself outwardly. Confidence is quiet, yet unmistakable. It is not something announced. It is something felt. When you claim your worth, respect your space, and maintain your autonomy, you create an aura that others notice without you saying a word. True, transformation happens when you realize that no one can take from you what you have already built within yourself. That is where magnetism is born, not from effort or manipulation, but from absolute authenticity. Carl Jung said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." To awaken now means recognizing that every act of confidence is a bridge between who you are and who you aspire to become. Every choice made with awareness strengthens your sense of control and inner security. In that space of stability, life becomes lighter and paradoxically more powerful. The attention of others ceases to be something you chase and becomes the natural consequence of who you are. Albert Camus reinforces this when he speaks of courage and authenticity. Real generosity toward the future lies in giving all to the present. Every conscious action, every decision not to fall back into the old victim narrative, builds emotional memory in the brain. Areas linked to attention, motivation, and emotion register that you are capable of transforming your own life. The sense of loss stops being a fear and becomes an incentive. The more you value yourself, the more the world realizes it cannot replace you or take you for granted. Strategic and complete confidence combined with a clear sense of value creates a virtuous cycle. The brain responds to your courage, reinforcing patterns of autonomy and joy in living. Emotional memory records every small victory, and your entire being aligns with this new state of inner power. That is how the victim role ends. The control was never lost. It has always been within you, waiting for you to choose to awaken.